Hey, good morning and welcome to Life Online. So I ran across something that I thought was interesting. This is Braco Dmitrievich. He is a Bosnian artist based out of Paris, but he became noted back in the 1970s when he went and took photos of just ordinary people, and he blew them up and he would put them on the sides of buildings. And his collection was called Casual Passerby. And then another interesting thing that he did was he would go and take these marble slabs, and there he would put, this could be a place of historical importance, and put them in places that were just kind of unknown places. But what he was doing was he's using the concept of questioning that every place where we are, there's got to be significance or things that happen in ordinary and everyday life. Well, I use that as a lead-in to this verse that we've looked at for a couple of days. And here's one more time we're going to look at it. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Now, the place where Israel was camped was no just ordinary place. This was a targeted place. What God had done is He had brought Israel, yes, out of the captivity in Egypt. But as they're moving along, it seems as if He gives them directions to make an about face, and they head back to a very specific point. So here, catch it. Verses 1 and 2, and then verse 9 of Exodus 14. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp near Pi-hahiroth, between Migdal and the sea. And they are to encamp by the sea directly opposite Baal-zephon. Now here, catch verse 9, because God's brought them back to this place, but this is also a place that God has hardened Pharaoh's heart, and He's moving Pharaoh and the Egyptian army for a showdown at the exact same place. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi-hahiroth, opposite Baal-zephon. So here it is. In this place, and the place of significance is this, you will find in rabbinic literature, it's the writings of the rabbis that point back to this time, the Exodus, the delivering of Egypt out of Israel. And one of the interesting traditions that arise is, in the writings of rabbis, they said that in that moment of the 10th plague, when the death angel passes over, but when the death angel visits Egyptian homes, and you will find the death of the firstborn in not only the human race of the Egyptians, but also of their livestock and of the animals, the firstborn male. In addition to that, the tradition is this, that all of Egypt's idols crumbled and fell as the death angel passed by, except for one. And this one place that you will find, it is Baal-zephon, and this is a god that of the Egyptians that would have stood over the Red Sea, and there it was believed that this is the one idol that never fell when this 10th plague took place in Egypt. And in fact, it may have inspired Pharaoh that there is one God that remains that is stronger than Jehovah God. Well, Jehovah God has drawn this enemy of His people, and He's going to deal with them one more time. As I read this, I sit back and say, as God drew Pharaoh back to this place, and there He dealt with him and all of the Egyptian armies, and needless to say, there's no God that could protect or enable Pharaoh to defeat Jehovah God and His people, because God stood strong and firm, and He had the last word as Pharaoh and his army perished in the Red Sea. Now, when I think of this, I can't help but somehow also believe that at times what God wants to do is draw us to the very place where we would maybe have idols that would be erected, and He wants to go ahead and deal with them. Do you remember this promise that the Lord, He will fight for you? You need only to be still. Many times we put our faith and confidence in all kinds of things. We put it in our wealth. We put it in our abilities. We put it in our reasoning. We think of so many different things. And these are the kinds of things actually that the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 10 addresses them as battles that actually end up happening in spiritual realms. Note what Paul says. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Now, did you catch the words that are used here? Words like strongholds, the word arguments, as well as pretension. And this is the idea. The Apostle Paul understands that there are these things that become fortified places that actually are places of strongholds of the enemy within our lives, imaginations. This has to do sometimes with our arrogance, these pretensions that we set up where we know better than God or we have figured it out. But the truth is that God wants to go ahead and face these strongholds of the enemy that it forms within our lives and see them come down. There's the idea is the strong tower. When cities were built in ancient days, you will find strong fortified walls, but you will also find a high tower. The high tower was the last thing to be guarded, and until you brought down the high tower, a city was considered as it was still viable. It was not yet conquered. In the same way, sometimes there are high towers and strongholds within our lives. And it has to do with our fears. It has to do with our doubts. It has to do with old thought patterns, but also that lead us into old ways of living rather than really the obedience of fully following after Christ. There are idols that easily set themselves up against the knowledge of God within our lives, but God wants us to open the door and let Him come in like a flood, really strong. And just as in strength, He parted the Red Sea and delivered His people, but brought it crashing down on the enemies. God wants to go ahead and deliver us out of strongholds of our lives. What pretensions does God want to tear down in your life? Why don't you let God just kind of mess with you today? Bring you away from the fears and the doubts that hold you back from the strong walk of faith. Have confidence in God and have an awesome day.